Hello and welcome to part one of the City of London Riverside route, which goes from London Bridge to the Tower of London. The first part of the route we're going to go on is shown here. This is how it's going to be looking from the Elizabethan times. We'll be going along the front where there would have been a few houses, but it would have been a lot of marshlands and gardens. Then we'll be crossing over St Katherine's Docks, not there, but the whole of the Tower of London is, and we'll end up at the top of Tower Hill where the executions tended to take place, and there was quite a lot of them taking place at this time. This is an alternative view taken from the Victorian times. You can see that the docks now were certainly there, much bigger than they are today, and the whole of the front was taken up by the industry and commerce feeding the city to the north. Okay, so we're just going to start the route now. We're going to just give you a view of the map as how it's looking from an aerial view. And you see we're just going to go along the Queen's Walk and then past HMS Belfast out towards City Hall, St Katherine's Dock on the back. So this will give you sort of like an aerial view now. And we're going to start the run at London Bridge, so it's important to give you a little bit of steer about what London Bridge was like at that particular time. It is one of our older stations. It was built in 1836 and it's changed a lot over the period. You can see from the following map where it is in relation to London Bridge. It's a lot smaller. Obviously it's grown a lot bigger over the years. You can see the viaducts. And you can even see St Olaf's Church, which when we start the run you'll see that it's not there. This was moved in the 1927. Now let's get you going on the route. We're going to start just outside London Bridge Station, and we're going to start this by going off Tooley Street and heading towards Olaf House where the church used to be. And if you look just to the left hand side you'll see there's a little gap, and there's a little pathway that will take you all the way down to the Queen Elizabeth Walk area. When you get to the end you'll see there's an opening, and we want to turn right, and you'll get some good views of the City of London. And the Queen's Walk, as we go into it, has some fantastic views over towards the North Bank. Now this was only really completed at the end of the last century, but some of the views, as you can see here going across the river, are not too dissimilar to what you would have seen back in the 1850s. This is a view across to Customs House. Now if we continue along the Queen's Walk, we will end up getting towards the Hayes Gallery. Now this is going to be an example of what a wharf would have looked like around the last century. Now we have things in London called wharfs, which tend to be pontoons or docks where ships will come into it. We have quays, which is a flat area where boats would moor and offload their goods, and then formal docks, which would have warehouses and customs area. Hayes Gallery is an example of a wharf where it had a specific purpose. Now most of the goods came in north of Tower Bridge, but things like tea, very important to the British, had its own particular area, and that is what Hayes Gallery was built for. Now if you have a look at Hayes Gallery you'll see that the inner area would have been the docks, and the building around it would have been the warehouses where the tea or the coffee would have been offloaded. Now the next thing we'll see as we come out of Hayes Gallery is HMS Belfast. This is a town class light cruiser. Town because it was Belfast is where it was built, and light cruiser, although it's about 11,500 tons, it actually did about 60 kilometers per hour. It was built in about 1939, just in time for the start of World War II. It saw service there and in the Korean War, and did tours up into the Arctic. It's got about 40 guns, torpedoes and a depth charger, and since 1971 it is a museum ship run by the Imperial War Museum. Coming out of the Hayes Gallery we will pass HMS Belfast and then we'll get into Moor Place. This is a area which has had quite a lot of developments. There's about 13 acres, and it was all part of the Port of London, so this is now offices. And the next building that will come up to past the scoop is a building that is the City Hall, which is the headquarters for the Greater London Council and is where the elected Mayor of London resides. He's elected by the people of London, and he has a term in office about 4 years, and he looks after the 32 boroughs. His main duties are about police, transport, fire, emergency and the London Plan. And this is different from the Lord Mayor of London in the City of London, which we'll hear about later. This has been here since 2002, and it was originally in County Hall, where we'll see in the Westminster sightseeing run is where the London Dungeons are. Now as we go past this, we'll see some great views of the Tower of London, but we end up at Tower Bridge. This is a very distinctive bridge. It's two bridges in one, in a sense. It's got a drawbridge, which is obviously where the ships go through in the middle, and it is a suspension bridge towards the north end. It was built in 1894, and its design is sympathetic to the Tower of London. In terms of height, it's about 134 foot tall. This was to allow ships to sail through so they could still service the Port of London, which was operating at that time. And it, in fact, today opens about 1,000 times a year. Now, there's been a couple of incidents with the Tower of London. So in 1967, a Hawker Hunter military jet flew right into the middle, or between the middle, of the two towers. And in 1997, because we wanted to keep time with when the bridge was opening, it did manage to split up President Clinton's cavalcade, much to the annoyance of the security forces. As we go across Tower Bridge, when we get to the end of it, we'll end up in St. Katherine's Docks. But some of the pictures that you'll be seeing will show you what the bridge looked like today and how it looked like in the past. And in fact, one of it shows it when it was opened. There is also the London Bridge experience that you can go up and see. Should you have the time, there is a lift that takes you to the top, but you walk down and then you can go down and see the engine room. However, we're going to continue this by going down to St. Katherine's Dock. Now, the diagram that we are just about to show you before we go down the stairs shows what the St. Katherine's Dock looked like, as well as its bigger dock on the other side, which is London Dock, which is no longer there. It's just houses and buildings, but St. Katherine's Dock remains almost as it was when it was built in 1828. At the time, it was the closest dock to London, and it replaced a number of tenement buildings and St. Catherine's Hospital, hence the name. It was built by St. Thomas Telford, and he built the warehouses on the quay so that it was very efficient to offload the goods. Today it's a yachting marina, residential offices and hotels, but a great place to go around and enjoy. Now we're just going to go down the stairs, and when you come out you just bear left and then first right past the hotel and the Brown building, and then you're into St. Katherine's Dock. And all we're going to do is just going to skirt around the side of the dock, and as you go across the drawbridge, turn right through some chain fencing and then go across the bridge to the front of the hotel, where you have some great views of London Bridge itself. And basically we come back on ourselves and we just take the second turning on our left, and that will bring you directly into the Tower of London. Now the Tower of London is Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, and it was built in 1066 by William the Conqueror, and it was one of the 36 forts that he built around the country in order to maintain his dominance of the country. In the middle there is the White Tower, which was built in 1078, and as we look at the Tower of London, you'll find it's very defensive. It obviously has a moat. It has two concentric circles that people have to get through. It has an armoury, it has a treasury, it has a royal mint, it holds all the public records, and it even had a zoo. On top of that, it held the crown jewels. It was a residence for the king or queen at the time, and on its darker side it had a prison, a torture chamber, and it was used for executions, although the main executions happened on Tower Hill just above that. And in terms of the number of executions, there was only 7 been inside the Tower of London itself up until 1900. In fact, 12 were done after 1900, mainly for prisoners that we caught for spying, and 112 notorious executions were done on Tower Hill. Now, inside the tower, the second and fifth wife of Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Howard were executed, and round about the time this map was drawn, or it was depicted. But there was also a third queen, Lady Jane Grey, who was our 9-day queen, and she was a queen in between Edward and Mary I, Bloody Mary, and she lasted 9 days, but she was also executed here. I mentioned that the Tower of London held the crown jewels. Now these have been around since Henry III's time in the 13th century, and he tended to keep the crown jewels as a way of pawning those if he needed to go to war, and he didn't need to want to ask the aristocracy for the money. It was held in many places, but it's where you see it today is in the Jewel House, and that's been there since 1994. You'll see about 23,500 gems, as also the King Edward crown, which is used for coronations, and the Imperial State crown, which is relatively new since 1937, which is used on state occasions such as the state opening of Parliament. The menagerie, which was held on the left-hand side of the tower, actually included things like polar bears and lions and elephants in the 13th century. The other photographs here show how the Tower of London looks today, or looked earlier, and you can see that the River Thames was used for industrial purposes there in terms of all the wood that's floating on the river. So returning to the run itself, as we go along the front of Tower of London, you can see that, and you can see Traitor's Gate coming into view, and as we go round to the front of the tower and turn up towards Tower Hill, on the right hand side you'll see that where the menagerie was, and as we go and cross the road into Tower Hill, just past the places where the executions were held, you'll see that there's 2 sort of sites that we just want to pick on. This is the site of the executions where most of them are taking place. Beheadings and hangings and the occasional hung, drawn and quartering. And we also see Tower Hill Memorial, which is where we celebrate the merchant seamen who were lost in the wars in the 20th century. Finally, we're in Tower Hill and Gardens, and this is where the second part of the route starts.
And that ends this section.